Good morning. Welcome to Lent. We're calling our message series for Lent Needy. But first, a little Spirituality 101. There is a God, and it's not you. I hope we're all not too disappointed with that. There is a Creator, and we are the created. God is completely self-sufficient in himself. God doesn't need anything. We, the created, we do have needs. But in the first reading, God speaks to Noah about his covenant that he would never again destroy his creation. Since we are the created, it means that we're dependent on God. We have needs that we must attend to if we're to thrive and survive. Think about all the needs that you and I have. Just start with our physical needs. That we all have a need for food and water, for sleep, for shelter, for clothes and medical care. We all need oxygen. On top of all those needs, we often need money to pay for our physical needs. But wait, there's more. We have our emotional needs. We have a need to be understood, a need for acceptance, a need for support and encouragement, a need for meaning and purpose in our lives. We need to laugh, and we need to grieve when we suffer losses. We all have a need for silence and solitude. And most of all, we have a need to love and be loved. On top of all those needs, we have spiritual needs. We have a need for God and a community of believers. We have a need for healing, which we spoke about in our last series. And we have a genuine need for prayer. I think we all know that intuitively, but many of us don't follow through with it. All in all, we are some needy people. God created us with needs and gave us the ability to take care of many of those needs ourselves. If you don't take care of your needs, and if I don't take care of my needs, then eventually we become someone else's responsibility. If we don't care for our physical health, if we don't care for our emotional health, if we don't care for our spirits and our souls, eventually we will become someone else's problem. Our lack of self-care inflicts damage on the people around us. However, if we do care for ourselves, we become capable of caring for others. So caring for our own needs is preparation for caring and serving others. If you're a parent, you can't prepare your kids for adulthood if you're not acting like a responsible adult yourself. If you're a manager or run a small business or a large corporation, the best way to lead your people is to lead yourself physically, psychologically, and spiritually. Spiritual maturity, growing as a follower of Jesus Christ, requires us to acknowledge our needs and take responsibility for them in a healthy manner. Our very neediness also makes us vulnerable to spiritual attack. We're tempted over and over again to ignore our needs or address our needs in unhealthy ways. Essentially, there's 4 temptations we face when it comes to our needs. The first temptation is to deny a legitimate need and act like we don't have it. A part of us rebels at the reality of having needs and being dependent. That was the temptation Adam and Eve faced in the Garden of Eden. God told them that they could eat from any tree in the garden except from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The serpent promised Eve that their eyes would be opened and that they would be like God, knowing good and evil. The temptation here is to be like a God who doesn't have to be dependent on God. Just like we may be tempted to deny our needs for rest, for help from others, for friendship, and for support, many of us are often tempted to deny our need for God. When we deny one of our legitimate needs, we're not moving towards spiritual health, but away from it. Just as it's a symptom of unhealthiness when a person loses their appetite and doesn't want to eat, because we really do need food for our bodies. It's a symptom of spiritual unhealthiness when we don't accept one of our legitimate spiritual needs, our need for God. So the first temptation we face is to deny that a legitimate need exists. The next three basic temptations come from the life of Jesus. In today's gospel, Mark tells us very little about the temptations that Jesus faces. The passage from Mark tells us that the Spirit drove Jesus out into the desert, and he remained in the desert 40 days, tempted by Satan. He was among the wild beasts, and the angels ministered to him. Short and to the point, but really lacking any of the details we need to understand more about Jesus. So now, the rest of the story. Mark was a man of few words. The author of the Gospel of Matthew goes into greater detail explaining all of the temptations that Jesus went through in the desert. Satan tempted him with bread to fulfill his need for nourishment. He tried to get Jesus to meet his legitimate needs in an illegitimate way. No moral shortcuts allowed. Satan then tempts Jesus with shadow needs in the disguise of what would appear to be good. He tried to get Jesus to throw himself off a parapet of the temple in Jerusalem to show off, knowing God would send his angels to save him. Jesus wouldn't do it. His miracles were only used to fulfill his purpose and his mission on earth. The temptation of the desert of the devil was to cast a shadow over Christ's mission by simply getting people to follow Jesus because of a spectacular sign, rather than because they really loved him and had freely decided to follow him. Satan tried to tempt Jesus to manipulate people rather than to really lead them. So this temptation was for Jesus to win over the people of Jerusalem with one magnificent sign, to go to Jerusalem and have everyone see him perform this miraculous feat would have won people's attention, but it wouldn't have won their hearts. With our needs, we're often tempted to settle for what is a shadow of the real and legitimate need. We have a need for rest, but so often we use our vacation time and go and do things that really don't bring rest to our souls. We say afterwards, we need a vacation from our vacation. We have a need for healing and relief from pain. But instead of losing weight and exercising to stay healthy, we try to escape the pain or numb the pain and self-medicate rather than solve the real problem. Finally, we're tempted to turn our needs into gods, to make them the whole of our life. This was the final temptation Jesus faced. The devil tells Jesus he can have all that he came to accomplish if he would only bow down for one moment, if he would treat the devil as if he were God. We know how that story ends. The point is that our needs scream to us in the same way. They gnaw at us to make them into our gods, to pursue them at all costs. We turn to one person and expect him or her to meet all of our needs in a relationship, and so we make that person a god. Some people make money into their god. We do need money in this world, but some make it the center of their existence. We all have legitimate needs. Ultimately, our neediness will either work for us or against us in our relationship with God. Our Heavenly Father intends that our neediness will lead us to Him and strengthen our bond with Him. As we heard in the second reading today, Christ suffered for sins once, the righteous for the sake of the unrighteous, that He might lead you to God. So over the next few weeks, we're going to look at some of our needs. Encourage you to commit to this series so that you can better understand your own needs. We hope that you can join us in person here at Mass, or at least try, if you're away, to live stream us on our website. Between now and next week, let me suggest a few questions to ponder. Examine your life, your pace of life, and how you're caring for yourself. Ask yourself, if I saw someone I loved meeting his or her needs or not meeting his or her needs in the same way that I am, would I be concerned? Do you want the people who follow you, whether it's your kids, your friends, your employees at work, or students in your class, to meet their needs in the same way that you're meeting yours? Recognizing our needs and taking the time to properly meet them is not selfish. It's absolutely vital to our spiritual health if we are to be the men and women God has created us to be.